All right, oh, here, you got one? Take one and pass it, please. Okay. It's just basically, you don't have to memorize it. It's
Good
just,
thing.
there's positive characteristics and negative characteristics about Peter.
Okay.
Because this was not a hard one to find information, because Peter's got plenty of information. So, thank you. Tell me what, oh yeah.
Thank you.
Tell me what you know about Peter. What do you know?
He's the rock.
That very good. He's the rock. Jesus called him Cephas, the rock.
He had lots of attitude.
Yeah, that's right. Always the first to speak up, foot in mouth.
Must have been born in October.
All right. So his name, Peter, means he has heard, and he was the son. A lot of times, the beginning, his name was Simon, or Simeon, and it was a really, really common name. One of the lectures that I listened to said that Simon and Joseph were a sixth of all the names that were given during that time. There were so many Simons and so many Josephs, and there's two just in the apostles here, Simon. So that was the clue that. That was true. And it's interesting too that Jesus' first words to Peter, and it should be Matthew 4:19, but more than put it next to "come follow me," because that really doesn't say "come follow me." It means that, but it should be Matthew 4:19 on that first one. But the first words that Jesus said to Peter is, "Come follow me."
Morning, Diane.
Hi,
When I
Diane.
was lost, I read one way and they sent me
Here.
another way, and I
Yeah.
never knew there was a prayer room here.
I didn't either. We're all room to follow me. And John 21:20, his last words were to Peter were, "You must follow me." Kind of ironic.
Oh, wow.
And the key verse is Matthew 16:18, which says, "And I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And that's how the Catholics determine that their belief that he was the first pope, because they believe that means that Jesus was saying that you're going to establish the church, which kind of was, because he was one of the major leaders of the first church. But there's many interpretations about what that means, but what the one I believe it means, what Jesus is referring back to his gospel, that upon the rock of what I'm telling you is going to be, not the fact that Peter's going to be the first pope. And there's no real evidence that that's true.
That's mine.
That's just tradition with the Catholics that he was the first pope. So don't really
That's what
know.
we had last week.
Okay.
What we do know is that he was born in Bethsaida, and so were Philip and Andrew, and I think another one from Bethsaida, and that was a fishing town, and it was on the crossroads of trade routes. So that's that. But the Romans controlled fishing. I didn't realize how much control they had over it. And it was a very difficult and dangerous occupation, because every time you went out, it's kind of like cops. You didn't know if the lake was going to go crazy and you're going to be caught in, if you were going to get any fish, or if you're going to be caught in a terrible storm like what happened when Jesus and Peter were walking on the water. So, and a lot of times they'd come back after a day of fishing and find nothing and have nothing. But Romans wanted their money, so Peter and Andrew, the brothers, were the sons of Jonah, and Simon, before he became Peter, was known as Simon Bar Jonah, which means the son of Jonah, and his name was also John. All these multiple names. The father was John or Jonah, and he was known as Simon Bar Jonah. And his family, the whole family, were fishermen, because usually in that time, well, kind of like today too, you do what your father does. And supposedly Zebedee was partners with John or Jonah, Peter's father, but Zebedee must have been a better fisherman because he had a lot more money, presumably, and he was the father of the boys of thunder, James and John. But supposedly they were in a partnership together, and also when the nets are going to break, and Peter's out alone at that, he calls them to come out and help him. Which I find it interesting too, that the story of when Jesus calls Peter, they'd gone out and had nothing, and he told them go out again, and they had so many fish that the nets were almost breaking up. That happens twice. And so they came in, and Jesus said, follow me, and they dropped everything. So I guess all that fish just went to waste or something. It's wondering, maybe John and James picked it up. I don't know. But I found that interesting, that he told them to go out and fish, to get all this fish, and then as soon as they come back, he said, follow me, and they dropped everything and followed him. Which I also
It's
find...
a test.
Yes. Are you going to leave that? Kind of like Matthew leaving his money. Because it's really interesting. When he said, follow me, every one of them, you know.
I don't suspect that they were on the ship by themselves, though. There were other men on the ship working. So maybe they picked it up and ran with it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
right. Right. Yeah. So, but I find it so interesting that all of them, when Jesus said, follow me, they dropped everything and went.
Yeah.
But he knew their hearts. You know, he wouldn't have picked them if he didn't know their hearts. Like Nathaniel. How'd you know I was under the tree? I'm Jesus. I know everything. Okay. So anyway, we do know that all right, there's so much that's tradition or speculation, but these are the things we know for sure. He was married because in Matthew 8:14-15 is when his mother-in-law is sick, and Jesus went and healed her, and that's in every single Matthew, Mark, Luke about him doing that. So we do know that he was married because he had a mother-in-law, and one of those places it says it was he and Andrew's house. So Andrew must have still lived with him and his family. And tradition says he had children, but there's nowhere in the Bible that says that. I mean, probably true, because that was what you wanted to do, have children. The more children, the better. But it doesn't. That is not confirmed anywhere in the Bible. But tradition says he has 3 children, and that his wife, who in the Chosen's name is Eden, which I like that name, was a relative of Zebedee. Another tradition, who knows if that's true, but that may be too why they were all these 2 families were so close together. And and the other thing that's interesting is the reason that they think that maybe his wife traveled with him too, because in Galatians, let me get this right. Dear. 1 Corinthians, I'm sorry, not Galatians. 1 Corinthians 9:5. This is Paul, obviously Paul talking, but it confirms that, so in 1 Corinthians 9:5, have we not, he's talking about he and Barnabas, have we not the power to eat and to drink? Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? So that seems to indicate that his wife was going along with him, and that and maybe a lot of the commentary says this also indicates that other apostles had wives. Once again, doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that they do, but there's just these hints that maybe they did. One would assume, that they might have. And the other thing that I found really interesting in one of these many things I listened to, he was trying to determine what the age was of Peter. And there is a passage that says that Jesus was almost 30 when he started his ministry. So, and most of the time when we perceive the apostles, or you see movies and stuff about them, they look the same or older than Jesus. And the person that was talking about this said he didn't believe that, because Jesus was the teacher rabbi, and usually the rabbi's students were younger than he was. And in the Jewish culture, there were certain age times. You went to school at 5, you till 12. At 12, that you should know the Torah and stuff, and by 15 you should be in what your occupation is going to be, at least working towards it. 18 you marry, and by 30 and 20 you should be established in your occupation, and by 30 that you could be a teacher if you were like of the Torah, or rabbi like Jesus. And that they say, see, that's true because Jesus was about 30. So they say, based upon that, Peter was married, so he probably was at least 18, but he was a disciple or apostle of Jesus, so he was probably younger. And he also said, but he was probably, this person that was talking believed he was probably the oldest of all the apostles, and that's probably why he's always named first when you name the apostles, because he was the oldest. But also, let me finish that thought and I'll go back to this other one. So, and also the person that was talking about this says he thought that the other apostles were probably teenagers at the oldest, because if Peter was only 18 or a little bit older and they were younger, they were probably teenagers, and that it was easier to teenagers to be inducted into the beliefs than if it was older people. So it was an interesting concept where they were only with him for 3 years, so if they're teenagers, they only got to be in at the most in their 20s. Mm-hmm. But who knows? Because we perceive it differently. But the only thing that I think is really solid about that is that Jesus was about 30 when he started his ministry, and that students were younger, but that could have been 25, 26. Doesn't have to be teenagers. But in Matthew, back to that, why Peter is always named first. In Matthew 10:2, all right. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, which are the 3 inner circles. But the first, Simon, that isn't just naming him as first. It's the Hebrew word means chief, or the head person. It isn't just that he was first. It's he was chief, or the head person.
That's coming from the word Simon, the name Simon?
No, first.
First.
The 10:2, when it says the first, Simon, the first in Hebrew mean the first, what? Chief, or the head. So, all right. It's also interesting when Jesus asked the disciples, who do they say I am? And they say, oh, Elijah, John the Baptist, blah 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 blah. And who do you say I am? And Peter, is also famous for the saying, the first to say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says to him, God told you this because you couldn't have known it by man. And he's probably all puffed up. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's interesting, just a few verses later, Jesus says to him, he gets rebuked because Jesus then starts talking about how he's going to have to go to Jerusalem and be killed and everything. And Simon says, oh, no, that can never happen. And that's when Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And so we go from being, you know all about, God's told you that, get behind me, Satan. And it didn't mean that Peter was Satan. It just meant that he was believing stuff that and it's not what Jesus was teaching. So
Jesus knew how to control Peter.
Yes, which I don't know if anybody else did. Maybe his wife did. Who knows? Who knows? Also, a little known fact too is the thing at Antioch with Peter and the hypocrisy that Paul called him on. Do you know that one? Mm-hmm. All right, Galatians 2:9-14. I'm trying to give you stuff that most people, it isn't like, we all know about the 3 times he denied him and the cock crowed. But, go. Galatians. All right, Galatians 2, 9 to 14.
9 to 14. Okay.
This is also in 9. When Paul first went to Jerusalem, nobody would have anything to do with him because they still thought he was the Christian killer. But Barnabas introduced him and said he's been speaking in Damascus, preaching about Jesus. You know, he's a good guy. So, and when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars of the church, that's another thing that Paul is calling those three the pillars of the first church, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen and they into the circumcision. Real nice. They were going to go to the Gentiles, and Peter and the others were going to go to the Jews. Only that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed, which means he was being hypocritical. For before that, certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. And when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live with the Jews? And what happened here is, when Peter first came to Antioch, they had these feasts, and he would invite the Gentiles in and eat with the Gentiles. And then Jews showed up, and he got either scared or thinking that they were going to go against him or something, so he rejected the Gentiles that he'd been eating with and just went with the Jews. And Paul found out about it, and that's what Paul's talking about. You know, you're being a hypocrite. When nobody's around, you know, you'll eat with the Gentiles, but when people show up, Jewish people show up, then you know, suddenly you only want to be Jewish. And there was also the debate at this time, if Gentiles converted to belief in Jesus, did they have to go through all the Jewish rituals, especially like circumcision? And at first Peter said yes, but then I guess he and Paul had big discussions, and then he said, no, you did not. All you had to do is believe in Jesus and you're in. And also didn't know this, and Paul spent 15 days in Jerusalem with Peter, where they must have had talked and decided about, you know, their beliefs on all these things. So never knew that one either.
Let me ask a question, please.
Yes.
When Peter was hanging up with the Gentiles, was he trying to convert them into?
Yeah.
Convert them over?
Okay. Right. But then when the Jews showed up,
he just disassembled himself from them. Like, I don't know you. Like, I disoffriend them.
Yeah.
And then I
don't
don't know
know
who
you
she is. Like how Judas and Peter did Christ.
Right. Also, when the inner circle, which was James, John, and Peter, there was they talked about the things that they were that they saw, and three of the most important things is they were the only ones that saw the healing of Jairus' daughter. And Jesus told them, don't tell anybody, but that didn't go too far. Everybody that he did a miracle to at the beginning, because it wasn't his time yet. And that's why he kept saying, don't tell anybody, because it wasn't his time yet. But they went out and told anybody. Who would, if you had been blind for 30 years and you you'd be telling everybody. So anyway, but the healing of Jairus' daughter, the transfiguration, and when he called him personally in Gethsemane. Those are three of the big ones that he happened. And another one is transfiguration, Peter. I'll be at the 3 tents, one for each of you. No, just be there and enjoy the thing. And then they all fell down and with the glory of God, and when they came back up, only Jesus was standing there. But anyway, he talks about in 2 Peter, he talks about being at the transfiguration. It's 2 Peter 1, 16 to 8. I mean, yeah, 2 Peter 1, 16 to 18. Okay. For we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, for we're eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received from God the Father honor and glory when there came such a voice to him from the excellent glory, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And this voice which came from heaven we heard when we were with him in the holy mount. So he's saying, I was there. I can tell you. I'm an eyewitness to all this. And talking about his impetuousness when he cut off the ear of the high Malchus, when Judas came and betrayed him and he kissed Jesus. And I always wondered, why did they... Jesus had been, well known, especially by these Jewish people that wanted to kill him and stuff. Why did they need Judas to kiss him to determine who he was? But people that I've talked about said it was dark in the garden and there were so many people and everything, so maybe. And supposedly some of Jesus' disciples resembled him. So I guess they didn't want to make sure they didn't take one of the wrong person. But
maybe they were testing him too.
Who?
If you will deny Jesus, we
oh,
want to
right,
see you
yeah,
deny.
right. Oh, I always wondered though. God can do anything. Maybe Judas, repented at the very end before he fell down the hill and his guts went flashing out. I mean, it talks about it later, though, that they call him a traitor and blah, blah, blah along, so I don't think that happened. But I always wondered, maybe, how could he be with Jesus the 3 years and see and do everything with him? And he felt badly, but what I've always heard is he just felt badly. He didn't really...
repent.
Right. But I just thought, he could have. You never know. You never know. So if we see Judas in heaven, we'll be glad to surprise. Yeah. Why did
he
you
very
do
well may be there, because some of the sinners on earth can be there who we think may not be there.
Right.
They always say, when Cinnamon and God reconcile, nobody knows.
Right. Right.
And if you see you dying, and this is a road going to heaven, and you see, and this is a road of darkness, you can choose that way of light, and you don't want to go to hell, and because everything comes back as a blackboard before you die. You see it all, so you can choose the right way, and you could ask for forgiveness. And I always say, don't wait until the last minute.
You don't know when your last minute's coming.
What could happen, and you don't know. So
you could die instantly and not have that choice.
Exactly. So don't be like the thief on the cross. Try to do it ahead of time, so you know where you're going.
A lot of people too, or a lot of the commentators say he was the first one to be in the empty tomb of Jesus and to see the risen Jesus, but that's not true. Because, he was the first one to actually go in the tomb, because I looked it up. That John, and after Mary Magdalene saw Jesus first, and he told her to go tell the disciples, and I'll meet him in Galilee. When she ran and told him, none of them believed her at first. It's a woman. What would she know? So finally, though, John and Peter, but John got there first because he was always younger and faster. But he didn't go in the tomb.
No.
Peter went in first, and then he did. But the Bible quote said he saw other people, and then later on he saw Peter. So he wasn't the first to see the risen Christ. See, you've got to be so careful when you read stuff and then go back to the Bible and say, is this really what it is, or are they taking it into their... And I don't understand how they can take it into the words are right there. But people do.
They switch it around.
And he was forgiven by Jesus, and that was when the feed my sheep, when Jesus talked to him and said, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. God, Jesus, I love you. Peter, do you love me? Feed my lambs. Jesus, I love you. And third time, but that was a sign that Jesus forgave him, and that, that we can move on with our life. And he did. Peter moved on big time, I mean, I'm sure he felt guilt, but he then at Pentecost, when they were in the room. I tell you, Mary, the mother of John Mark, they were all in her house in the upper room, and with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene and his followers. And that's when the Holy Spirit came upon them with the little fire, the things of fire. And then he went out and preached, and it was his first major sermon, and it must have been powerful because that's when 3,000 people got converted. So it must have been. And that was after they'd spoken earlier, and they all had speak in their own languages, and they're saying, "Are they drunk?" And which, how could you know a language even if you were drunk? I find that interesting too. And the response I also find, it's only 9:00 in the morning. Drunks get drunk at 9:00 in the morning. You know, that was no response in my book, but whatever. So, the other interesting thing, which I never knew before, was a lot of people say that he was the one that gave all the information to John Mark to write the Gospel of Mark. It was Peter's, what he saw and what he heard and everything, and he gave all that information to Mark, and that's how Mark wrote his Gospel. Mark was in some of it, was involved in some of it directly, but not, all the stuff he saw. But none of them, well, maybe Matthew. But so another thing we don't have anywhere in the Bible, it says, "Oh, Peter helped Mark write his gospel," but tradition says that it was that, and I found it in a lot of different places, which really can, there can be heresy in a lot of different places, but a lot of different sources said that was, that he helped. And he spoke that the Sadducees, when Peter and John went to the temple to preach, they called them illiterate and uneducated, but they said, how can these illiterate, uneducated people speak like this? And the other thing is, when can't even think of his name, was teaching us Peter. I said, how can a fisherman have this elaborate, beautiful language that is in 1st and 2nd Peter? It's God. It's God. It doesn't matter how educated you are. If God, the Spirit is moving you, you can do anything. So, but he for sure spoke Aramaic because that was the language of the common people during that time. But the sources also said they believed he could also speak Hebrew and Greek because he had to do business and sell his fish and everything, so he had to know how to deal with these people. So he may have not been fluent, but he must have had a smattering of Hebrew and Greek to be able to carry on his business. Unlike Matthew, like we talked about last week, Matthew was fluent in all those because as a tax collector, he had to be able to get his money and get it right. So, all right. So, okay, we know that how Peter first saw Jesus was through Andrew. When Andrew and another disciple not named were disciples of John, and when they were with John that one day, and Jesus came walking by, and John said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world," which then Messiah. So Andrew went and got Peter and said, "I found Messiah." And one of the places that I was doing said it was not that Peter didn't instantly believe that, and also that they saw miracles because they were with him when he went to Cana and did the wedding at Cana wine thing. But this one place said that wasn't still, Peter had not decided that was Messiah. It was just when the whole fishing thing and the fish were then and Jesus said, "Follow me." But I tried to get what the time frame was, and I couldn't tell whether actually Cana became before that or what. So if you guys want to look deeper into that, decide. But I think Peter, from the time he saw him, I don't think he waited and saw miracles and stuff. But who knows? And another interesting thing about Peter's death in John 21:8. All right, now, number one, Jesus told all the disciples you're going to encounter persecution. But Peter directly in John 21:8, which is their way of saying it, so. He's speaking to him and he said, oh no, that's not right. Oh my goodness, no. 21:18. Yes, let's get this right. All right. This is Jesus. He says unto him, oh, this is when Jesus is also saying, back to 15. Well, 14. This is now the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was risen from the dead. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He said unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my lambs. He said to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said, Feed my sheep. 17. He said unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, Lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus said again, Feed my sheep. And now Jesus says, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and walkest wherever thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee, and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. And this is interpreted to say that he's going to die by crucifixion, that stretch forth thy hands. That was an indication of crucifixion. Oh, Peter's probably just so thrilled. Number one, he gets rebuked, feed my sheep, and now I'm going to die by crucifixion. And so, and he was martyred in Rome under Nero, because Nero was going crazy, persecuting Christians. And once again, tradition that Peter was, not this part, Peter was arrested. And supposedly at the same time his wife was arrested. And then to torture Peter even more than crucifixion, supposedly they crucified his wife first. And then when she was walking to be crucified, he was encouraging her, You're going to heaven, go for it, girl. So when he went to be crucified, tradition again, we don't know. He said he wanted to be crucified upside down because he was not as good to be the same as Jesus that and number one, nobody knows for sure whether or not he actually was crucified upside down. If he did, one of the people said that the reason he did it, which I think this was Huey Billy, but that he wanted to indicate that this was an upside down world. Really? I don't think so. If it's true, I think it was what he said he did. He was not good enough to be crucified the same way as Jesus. Okay. Oh, and if you watch The Chosen and stuff, you see Peter's this little man with nice, beautiful hair, but all muscular. And that's true, because you would have to be muscular to be hauling those fish in and everything. But what the tradition says, he was a large, tall man with curly hair, with a round face and a beard, and receding hairline and a beard. And the other interesting thing, which you may know, that John, when Peter snuck in to follow Jesus when he was going to the trial with Caiaphas, and he was sitting around, this is when he denied him. The reason he was able to do this, because John got him in, because John's family, so another indication that Zebedee was higher up than any of them. John's family somehow had a connection to the higher-ups in the synagogue. So he was able to get Peter to go in, which was probably a mistake, because that's where he did the denying. But it was going to happen anyway, wherever he was, because Jesus told him he'd do it. Mm-hmm. So, and that's when it says the pride on the papers, that was when he said, oh, me, never, Jesus, I'll never do that. Oh, that's why we have to be so careful. Mm-hmm. And he was the first leader of the Jerusalem church. and he came to Rome. But he had to leave at one point. He came to Rome. The persecution was going on. He had to leave, but he came back, and he was the leader with Jesus' brother James of the Jerusalem church, and that's James, John, and him. That's why Paul called them the pillars of the church.
Someone had said that James was the first.
Yeah, James was the first martyr, got killed first.
No, the leader of the Jerusalem church.
The James, the brother of Jesus. Yeah. But I think Peter was first.
Okay.
But
is that tradition or scriptural?
Tradition.
Okay.
Tradition, and that may be the Catholics' version of it, but he was a leader of the church. Jesus called him a pillar or Paul called him a pillar of the church. And they, one of the other places said too, remember the story when Peter asked Jesus if they should pay taxes, and Jesus said, give them to Caesar. And so, but Peter and Jesus, that was another indication where they said of the age of Peter, because only Peter and Jesus had to pay taxes. So that was why they thought the others were younger. So maybe just there they didn't say they had to pay taxes. And another interesting thing.
Is that why the church is exempt now?
Yeah, I guess so. One of the other things they said, which I find interesting, that the name Bar-Jonah might also mean terrorist.
Yeah.
That they thought that was given to Peter because he was considered a terrorist. And at least a zealot. But we only know that Simon the Zealot was the zealot of the apostles. So some of it could be true. We don't know.
It could be true, but I'm not saying it's true. Okay, before they were converted,
yes,
and meet up with Jesus, probably they might have been terrorists. They were sinners, so they did things that
Paul
was a murderer. And
right,
after they were converted and followed Jesus, their whole life changed. But then we know they had to go through a lot of persecution and all this other stuff.
Right. And to prove your point, one of the things that I heard or saw or read or something said that when he was growing up, he was probably fighting all the time because it was the Bethsaida. Before he was born in Bethsaida and grew up in Bethsaida, and then after he got married, he moved to Capernaum, better shipping area because it was the top of the Sea of Galilee, and it was a bigger place too. And that he because there were Gentiles, there was a big mix of Romans and Jews and Gentiles in Bethsaida. So Peter was probably fighting all the time because that anger and stuff, personality had. Whereas Andrew was more laid back and chill, Peter, chill.
I think Peter was fighting for survival amongst all those Romans and other people.
Right. But I think he might have provoked some of it too.
Probably, yeah.
So. And it was interesting too that when Jesus would get the first time before he called Peter, he had spoken to crowds, and then there was more and more crowds. So there was two boats sitting, and he got into the boat, and it was Peter's boat, and he told Peter to row him out so he could get away from. And it isn't amazing how his voice could all those thousands of people. But God can do anything.
That's right,
We don't need a sound system. Okay, and then the escape, the miraculous escape in Acts 12. Acts 12 tells a whole lot about more about what happens after Jesus is gone. The whole book of Acts, and what happens to the new church and after Jesus is gone. And in Acts 12, after Herod had executed James the apostle, not James the brother of Jesus, Peter was taken, and because he saw how the Jewish people thought that was such a great thing. Nice young people. He imprisoned Peter. But that's the time when the angel came and got Peter out of prison. And at first he thought he was on drugs and seeing stuff or something because he thought it was a dream. And then let's go. And the city gate magically opened. And he went. That's when he went to the house, and the servant Rhoda came to the door and left him outside because she's so excited and told Peter's here, Peter's. Nobody believed him, and he's still banging on the door. Let me in before they get me. And supposedly when he was still in prison, another tradition, not in the Bible, that while he was imprisoned in Rome, he baptized his guards because water mysteriously came out of the prison walls, and he used that to baptize the guards. I mean, it could happen that the miracles that Jesus does, but it's just tradition. So afterwards, when it said, where did Peter travel? After the after the new church started in Acts, he went to Antioch, and that was where he did the thing which he was hypocritical about the Jews and the Gentiles. But he also went to Corinth. Okay, the sites that he went to Antioch is Galatians 2:11-14. He went to Corinth in 1 Corinthians 1:12 and 9:5. He went to Asia, Galatia, and Cappadocia, and he says that in 1 Peter 1:2, and in Rome, and 1 Peter 5:13. And one of the sources said that he had a 35-year ministry in Rome, which seems a long time, but until he was killed, he was martyred. So that's when I guess they think, he was the head of the Rome church. And he was considered the bishop of Antioch and also the bishop of Rome. And this one says it was either 25 years or 15 or 16 years when he was the bishop of Rome. So we either have 15 or 16, 25 or 35. So, and supposedly, because you saw this where he was buried.
Yes,
Alleged. Tell the story, because you only told it to me.
Okay. The Vatican is in
She's
Petersburg.
been there.
I've been.
Okay. We were having the privilege to go down.
Where does
Really?
that have to leave?
All right,
Okay.
right. You're allowed. That's also another tradition where he was supposedly crucified. That was built on, he was built and buried on the same place he was crucified.
Okay.
Tradition? They didn't tell you that?
No,
Okay.
no, because the
Catholics don't do tradition.
No.
Oh. Yeah,
Bye.
they were basically focusing on Peter and the grave
Okay.
and the
Okay.
rock in which he was buried in.
And one of the places said he was traditionally crucified at the Nerosian Gardens in the Vatican. Do you know what they're talking about? I've never been.
The gardens are a very special place that they have, but that's not where
He was supposed to. Okay. Peter was also the first apostle to perform a miracle after Jesus passed away. And that was the lame man. But then after that, he started, he did Dorcas, that he went to, not Joppa. Was she in Joppa? No.
I think so.
All right, Acts 10.
I think she
We'll
was.
see where she is.
I think it's chocolate.
All right. This is when Cornelius the Gentile sends for Peter. And this is where Peter has the dream where the sheet comes down from heaven and has all these unclean foods, and God says, eat. God, I've never eaten this stuff in my life. How could I? And he said, you don't eat something that I've given you. You eat what I've given you. And this was all God's way of saying Gentiles are going to be saved just like the Jews. They're not unclean. As long as they believe in Jesus, they're in. So, and isn't it interesting? This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up into heaven. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God has cleansed thou call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up into heaven. So God told him 3 times. Peter's kind of thick, like you said.
I see Dorcas at the end of.
Yeah.
Yes, it was in Joppa.
Oh, it's 9? Oh, right, you're right.
9.
Now there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, which by interpretation is called Dorcas. The woman was full of good works and alms deeds which she did. And and that's another indication that people think, okay, you're in because you do good deeds. You know,
No.
and came to pass in those days that she was sick and died, whom when they had washed, they laid her up in the upper chamber. And forasmuch as Lydia was nigh to Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent unto him 2 men, desiring him that would not delay to come to them. Then Peter arose and went with them. When he was come, they brought him into the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him, weeping, and shewing the coats and garments which Dorcas made while she was with him. But Peter put them all forth, and kneeled down and prayed, and turning him to the body said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand, and he lifted her up, and when he had called the saints and widows, presented her alive. And it was known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And it came to pass that he tarried many days in Joppa with one Simon, a tanner. So another reason, many believed in the Lord. So amazing. It's so amazing, and he was able to do that. So
I find it interesting that three, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, 3, the Trinity. 3 is a very important number.
3, 7, and 12
Yes.
are the biggies. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. Is that, and who cares about numbers? But obviously God does.
God
He
does
does.
it. means
Right.
God.
So.
And
all right.
7 too.
Yes.
3, 7, 12,
And
and 40.
7, perfection.
And 40.
40. Perfect.
Right. And that's why the 12 apostles, because of the 12 tribes, etc., etc. You know, it just. All right. Any comments or questions or anything?
This is
I didn't
good.
get everything over Peter, but Peter, it's going to get some slimmer from here